Welcome back, guys. We are here for our Thursday reading, which will cover questions 18 through 22. And this one kind of picks up in the middle of the last section, but it will definitely end on a ending part before we get the last section tomorrow. So we're in the middle of a conversation that Montag was having with his wife and her two friends, Mrs. Phelps and Miss Bowles. They'd already discussed their view of war and their husbands, which were both quite disturbing. But today we're going to get the one about their kids and politics, which are just as bad, to be honest with you. The one about the kids is even worse. So let's pick up with that. That's right where we're starting, actually. So I'm going to read this section. It's a little bit of reading, but it says, the women jerked and stared. How are your children, Mrs. Phelps? He asked. You know I haven't any. No one in their right mind, the good Lord knows, would have children, said Mrs. Phelps, not quite sure why she was angry with this man. I wouldn't say that, said Mrs. Bowles. I've had two children by cesarean section. No use going through all that agony for a baby. The world must reproduce, you know. The race must go on. Besides, they sometimes look just like you, and that's nice. Two cesareans turned the trick. Yes, sir. Oh, my doctor said cesareans aren't necessary. You've got the hips for it. Everything's normal, but I insisted. So we're not done yet, but let's just tackle that. You know, today a C-section is a pretty normal thing, and I guess in the 50s or 60s it still was kind of that, but it was a lot more dangerous. And she says that she purposely chose to go through that because she didn't want it to mess up her body, which I'm guessing it still did. But she basically is saying that the pain wasn't worth it to deal with a kid. And she points out the good thing about them is that they look like you sometimes. That's her, the benefit of children. Since cesareans are not, children are ruinous. You're out of your mind, said Mrs. Phelps. Now, this is the disturbing part. She says, I plunk the children in school 9 days out of 10. I put up with them when they come home 3 days a month. It's not bad at all. You heave them into the parlor and turn the switch. It's like washing clothes, stuff laundry in and slam the lid. Mrs. Bowles tittered. They just as soon kick as kiss me. Thank God I can kick back. The women showed their tongues laughing. Now, that showed their tongues laughing. Imagine, some of you are going to try this right now, but most of us laugh without our tongues hanging out of our mouth. That makes us look like idiots. They're idiotically laughing about, of all things, child abuse. I mean, seriously, the woman just said she hits her kids, and they all started chuckling and laughing about it like it's no big deal. Also, the point that she's like, we throw them in front of the TV and just leave them there, which, that one hits kind of close to home. You can see tons of kids who are raised on TV, and that's all they have is their babysitter, sadly. And so, pretty disturbing imagery about how they feel about their kids. You can tell there's no love. We can see there was no love for their husbands. There's no love for their children either. So they only care about themselves. All right. Now they're going to talk about politics next. And this one, again, I wouldn't say this one is as heavily hitting home, but I think we can see some elements of it. All right. Let's talk politics to please Guy. Sounds fine, said Mrs. Bowles. I voted last election, same as everyone. I laid it on the line for President Noble. I think he's one of the nicest looking men ever became president. Oh, but the man they ran against him. He wasn't much, was he? Kind of small and homely, and he didn't shave too close or comb his hair very well. What possessed the outs to run him? You don't just go and running a little short man like that against a tall man. Besides, he mumbled. Half the time I couldn't understand a word he said, and the words I did hear I didn't understand. Sorry, I didn't read that right. It says half the time I couldn't hear a word he said, and the words I did hear I didn't understand. Fat, too, and didn't dress to hide it. No wonder the landslide was for Winston Noble. Even their names helped. Compare Winston Noble to Hubert Hogue for 10 seconds, and you can almost figure the results. Now, they kind of hit on something there. I mean, it looks really obvious, like one guy was the obvious choice and one wasn't. You had this really tall guy with a Winston Noble name who spoke well and did everything he was supposed to, and then you had this little short, fat, scruffy-looking dude who, didn't speak all that well. They say later he's picking his nose during the debates. It's almost like they wanted you to vote for one and only gave you one option. If you'll remember back with the conversation about Beatty earlier, Beatty said to remove choice from people, to give them the illusion of choice, but really give them one option and then one really bad option that no one's going to pick. So that it looks like they picked the other one. And that's how they did it. And we see that working out here. And these women actually hit on it when they're like, why did the outs even run? Look, their party's name is the outs, meaning that they're on the outside. I mean, everything leads to believe this guy's not supposed to win. The other one was supposed to. Now, I don't think our politics are that sinister by any stretch, but I do think people vote for the wrong reasons a lot of the time. I think that that's a definite issue we're going to struggle with going into the future. And I don't mean the next election. I mean a series of elections now. That people are going to vote based on not the best things for the country or for the best is for people as a whole, but for their own preferences as far as I like the way this person looks. And I think people do that now. I think there's several times we've seen that happen. All right. But, we'll see how that goes. This is infuriating Montag. So he blows up and decides, I can't stand this anymore. I'm going to go grab my book of poetry and I'm going to try to educate these women. Now, very stupid plan. All right. But you know how this is. When somebody becomes a fresh believer in a specific concept, they want to share it with everyone and they want everyone to see it their way because they're passionate about it. And Montag is that way right now. The problem is that a lot of times people aren't in that same place as you are. And so these women are not. And Montag's about to make a huge mistake. And Faber knows it. Faber is in his ear, talking to him, he's furious. He's like, don't do this. If you do it, I'm cutting off. But Montag ignores it, grabs the book and starts talking about it. He even makes this really disturbing comment. He says, did you hear them? Did you hear these monsters talking about monsters? Oh, God, the way they jabber about people and their own children and themselves and the way they talk about their husbands and the way they talk about war. I stand here and I can't believe it. So he's pretty disturbed with them. At this point, Bradbury makes a huge mistake, characterization, in my opinion. Mildred, who has been this moron for a majority of the book, all of a sudden becomes really smart and seems to hit on an idea. She makes up a story about how firemen are allowed to bring a book home one time a year and share it with their families to see how stupid it is. And so she's like, look, the guy just wants to show it to us. So here, look, we'll read a poem real quick and we can all laugh at it. That's a really clever cover for a person who really doesn't seem to have that in her. And maybe she did. He just didn't develop her enough in that way. It's one of the few flaws in this book I really have issues with. All right, but Montag turns to the poem. It's entitled Dover Beach, and I actually teach this in my senior classes. It's by a guy named Matthew Arnold, and it's a beautiful poem. The wording is beautiful. I don't know how to convey this to you guys, but there's times where writing is just beautiful because of the way the words fit together and they flow. It doesn't always have to be the most obvious thing. And we live in a culture that really downplays the value of our words. So this may be lost on you, but seriously, this poem is one of those that just the way it's worded is beautiful and it has impact on people. And we're going to see how it impacts them. Now, it's in your text somewhere. But anyway, remember that Bradbury had a choice of thousands, if not millions, of poems he could have picked. And he picks this one on purpose for what I just told you, the reason. It is a powerfully worded poem. All right. The idea in it is there too. It's really about the fact that, we really only have us and the people we love, and the rest of the world's kind of against us. But after he reads the poem, Mrs. Phelps just bursts into tears. She's one of these people that the wording impacted her. Just don't think for a second she knows what it's saying, but it impacts her and she starts crying. Montag goes out on with the ploy. He takes the book and throws it in the incinerator. Like, see, wasn't that stupid? But Mrs. Bowles, particularly, is very upset with Montag. And her and Mrs. Phelps are both upset. Miss Phelps is crying, but Miss Bowles is angry. Miss Bowles points out that poetry just causes unhappiness and suicide, and she wants to know why people would. I think it's her. Yeah. She says, why would people do this? Why would you have words that hurt people? Obviously, it just makes people unhappy, and all we want is to be happy. Now, she's going to storm out. And on the way out, Montag has this last little, got to yell at her about something. The point of this is not to ooh, he owned her. It's not that. The point of it is to show that she's really not happy. She just thinks she is. What's going to be talking about entertainment's about disguising our unhappiness. All right. I mean, in a way, it's like alcohol. If you're having a bad day and you go and drink a bunch, you feel better for that time period, but the problems are still there and you're going to wake up with bigger ones in the morning. So entertainment's the same way. If you've had a bad day and you come home and throw yourself down for 6 hours of Netflix streaming, you forget about your problems maybe for those 6 hours. But the next morning you get up, they're still there and you didn't deal with them the night before. So in a lot of ways, they're just an opiate that allows us to escape momentarily. So as she's leaving, this is what Montag says. And tell me if you think this woman's really happy based on this. Go home, Montag fixed his eyes upon her quietly. Go home and think of your first husband divorced, your second husband killed in a jet, and your third husband blowing his brains out. Go home and think of the dozens of abortions you've had. Go home and think of what your cesarean sections too, and your children who hate your guts. Go home and think of how it all happened and what did you ever do to stop it. Go home, he yelled, before I knock you down and kick you out the door. Now, a little bit angry there for sure, but he points out this is what your life actually is. Explain to me how you're happy. And what we can see here is that she's probably not. She's probably hiding it behind everything else, just like we do today. We hide it behind entertainment. We hide it behind drugs. We hide it behind alcohol. We hide it behind all sorts of things. All right. At this point, Mildred runs to the room, slams the door, and Montag can hear her swallowing sleeping pills. She's not killing herself, don't worry, but she is that's how she forgets things, to be honest with you. So Montag realizes he's screwed up. So he leaves. He's about to head to work. And on the way, he pops the ear thimble back in so he can listen to Beatty. And Beatty tells him, look, man, don't be angry at them. Don't be mad at them. They're the same place you were hours ago. They just haven't come to that realization yet. They're ignorant just like you were. You have to give them a break. And I think that's a really important message. I think that's a really powerful message to understand that, just because you're passionate about something and really feel one way doesn't mean everyone else is there yet. And you can't be mad at them for not being. All right. In fact, here's what Beatty says to him. He says, and I really like this. This is really well written. He says, pity, Montag, pity. Don't haggle and nag them. You were so recently of them yourself. They are so confident that they will run on forever, but they won't run on. They don't even know that this is all one huge, big, blazing meteor that makes a pretty fire in space, but that someday it'll have to hit. They see only the blaze, the pretty fire, as you saw it. It's like, these people only see it for what it is now. They don't see the long-term results of what could happen. And, they have to come to realize that on their own. Now, Montag he's got a definite internal struggle going on here, right? I talked to you guys a lot about there being a physical climax in a play, but also there being like this internal climax, which is your epiphany. And Montag is getting close to that because right now he's hitting a really high peak of internal struggle. He's like, look, I shared that poem with them and look how miserable I made that woman. And he points out maybe it's better not to do this. Maybe it's better to just let people be ignorant. And that clicks with Faber. Faber's like, no, you can't do that. If the world was okay, it would be fine, but the world is not. It looks okay on the surface, but underneath it's not. And we have to deal with it or eventually everything will collapse. And at that point, Montag just says, please be with me as he's about to go confront Beatty, which is going to be the end of chapter 2, this interaction with the two of them. And it's going to leave us on a definite cliffhanger as chapter 2 ends. But that'll get you through question 22. That finishes today's reading. So I'm going to stop this. I'm going to take some notes. We're going to come back and we're going to hit the last one for this week, which will get us through chapter 2 and set us up next week for chapter 3. So thank you guys for your attention.